What's up, interpreters? I'm Bob Stanton, a 35-year career veteran of the National Park Service, having worked in a number of parks and regional offices and 4 assignments in the national office. Following my career with the National Park Service, I was privileged to serve 5 years as a senior advisor to the Secretary of the Department of Interior. And I thought it would stop with that, but then President Obama appointed me to a 4-year term, which extended into 6 years, as a member of the Advisory Council on Historic Preservation, which is an independent federal agency established in the National Historic Preservation Act of 1966. So a total of 46 years in public service with the federal government. A great journey along the way. And it's been my privilege, my honor, and pleasure to be associated with interpreters and preservationists and conservationists over that span of time. And that journey continues. And most recently, my participation in the conference in Virginia Beach was outstanding. And I'm still inspired by having the opportunity to interact with many of the interpreters who are on the front line serving the American public.
What's up, interpreters? This is Song. I'm your NAI Events and Conferences Manager.
What is up, interpreters? I am Paul Caputo. I'm the Executive Director for NAI. So, Bob, you introduced yourself as Bob Stanton. I have been using the full phrase, the Honorable Robert G. Stanton, anytime that I've been introducing you. I did not introduce you. I was on stage when Parker McMullen Bushman, NAI's president, introduced you as NAI's President's Award recipient for 2025. So congratulations on that accolade. We'll add that into all of the many other accolades that you listed. Thank you so much for being here. It's genuinely an honor to have the opportunity to speak with you again. We've gotten to speak at a couple of NAI conferences in the past, and so it's certainly an honor to have you here. I wanted to just ask a really basic question for you. In all of your 46 years working with federal agencies and working in the public service, what has the role of interpretation been for you in your service to the public in all of those roles that you've held?
Well, first of all, thank you for your leadership and for your kind comments. Interpretation is critically important in connecting, if you will, and that's my term, connecting the American people and our international visitors with their heritage. An appreciation and an understanding and support of our heritage does not come automatically. There has to be something that brings people together with their heritage, particularly as it's represented in our national parks and other protected areas. So making that connection is critically important. The Organic Act that established the National Park Service speaks to its responsibility of providing for the enjoyment of the people of their national parks and other resources. It does not use specifically the term interpretation, nor does it use the term education. But the Park Service has adopted a definition, if you will, of what was intended by Congress when they used the term enjoyment. How can one enjoy or understand their their resources without making that connection? And that's what interpretation does. It makes that connection. Intellectually, emotionally, physically, or spiritually, or any way you want to describe it, but it makes that connection.
Bob, you've had a very full career. How did you get into the Park Service? What prompted you to go become a ranger?
Thank you very much, Song. You want me to date myself, and I accept that invitation. I was first introduced to a national park and to the mission of the National Park Service following my junior year at a small historically black university in Austin, Texas, with my appointment as a seasonal ranger in Grand Teton National Park in Wyoming. I had never been to a national park, nor any of my relatives had been to a national park. And this was in 1962. And certainly you recall history that we were still a segregated country by law, if you will, as permitted by law in 1962. So all of my childhood and young adulthood was under the doctrine, the insidious doctrine, I might add, of separate but equal. But it was through the courageous and the visionary leadership of a young Secretary of the Interior Department by the name of Stuart Lee Udall, who said that we're going to change the face of the National Park Service employment. And for the first time, at least on any large scale, Interior recruited under his direction at historically black colleges and universities. And I was recommended by my college president, along with others, to be one that perhaps could accept and do well in this new challenge. So that was the beginning of my introduction to the Park Service in 1962. And that relationship continued until I stepped down as the 15th Senate confirmed director on January 2001. But it continued, as I mentioned earlier, serving in the Department of Interior and serving with the Advisory Council on Historic Preservation. So, in short, it was the result of the vision and the leadership of Stuart Udall that appointed this young fellow named Bob Stanton from Mosher Valley, Texas, student at Houston-Tillotson University, as a seasonal park ranger in Grand Teton National Park in 1962.
1962, it was we were in the middle of the civil rights movement and race relations in the United States. It continues to be a difficult period, but it was a difficult period in the 60s. What were the challenges you faced, working at Grand Tetons in Wyoming? Were there specific challenges related to, being a black interpreter at a national park in Wyoming or any national park in 1962?
I appreciate that question because you're correct that 62 was 2 years before President Lyndon Baines Johnson signed the watershed legislation that we know today as the 1964 Civil Rights Act that gave a decent burial, I would have hoped. I'm not sure it was completely buried, of that insidious doctrine of separate but equal. So many public accommodations, certainly in my home state of Texas, were still segregated. And there were some, was the case in Wyoming. But the most interesting experience was two things. One is that there had not been any African Americans who had worked in Grand Teton prior to my appointment, along with two other African American rangers slash interpreters.
Wow.
Then secondly, there was limited African American visitation to Grand Teton and certainly to Yellowstone, just 5 miles away north of Grand Teton. So that was interesting, not to be able to greet members of my own community, if you were.
Mm.
And one would have to understand that if you were to drive, if you will, or fly from Texas or take a bus into Wyoming, what have you, and look for accommodations in 1962, you could be denied accommodation, denied entrance to a restaurant, or whatever the case may be. So that was a part of it. But I would tell you, and I'm reflecting on this, and I don't want to prolong it, but it's something that I will be describing in more detail in my memoir, which I am writing, hope to have published by the end of next calendar year,
Mm.
is that it was very obvious that many of the visitors who had been coming to Grand Teton and to Yellowstone over the years, and maybe their parents before that, were surprised, and some were not pleased to see a black face in uniform with a badge welcome them to their park. Some were just visibly were not pleased to see that. And then there were some who said that, and this is something I get very emotional about because I had not dwelled on. Some would say this: "I'm pleased to see you here." Think about that. There were some who knew the difficulty that we as a country were facing, but they said, "I'm glad to see you here," and that has meant a lot to me as I reflect on it. But lastly, just in terms of Grand Teton, and I don't know whether there's a stroke of faith, somebody was looking after me upstairs or what, but for the three of us African Americans who worked in Grand Teton in 1962, we were very, very fortunate in that we were genuinely welcomed by the professional park staff there. Even though the Park Service had no say-so about blacks being on the workforce, Secretary Udall said this is a new day and we're going to have black faces heretofore working as rangers and interpreters. But we were totally blessed in that and give you some idea of the caliber, the quality, the professionalism of the staff was there. My assistant chief ranger eventually became an associate for operations and management in the national office, which was considered at that time sort of the number three. My superintendent at that time, Hawthorne Spud Bill, became a deputy director on the legendary George B. Hartzog. Uh, and then my chief ranger, my all-time hero, Russell E. Dickinson, became a director of the National Park Service. The caliber of people there that inspired me, and unfortunately, that was not the case in some of the other parks where African American was due to station at the same time. And just let me close with this in terms of Russ Dickinson and Spud Bill. While Spud Bill was serving as the deputy on George Hartzog and Russ Dickinson as the regional director of the National Capital Region, and at that time I was park management assistant, they said that we're going to integrate the superintendency ranks of the Park Service. So in 1970, the Park Service newsletter would read, National Park Service appoints its first Negro superintendent. Yours truly, Bob Stanton.
Amazing.
Bob, how difficult is it for you to carry that designation?
Well, it's one of humility and honor and gratitude, I suppose. And what that means in essence, Song, is that it implies that I have an obligation to help others on their journey. So I have been able to see an increase, not only of African Americans, but those of a Latino heritage, Indian heritage, and Asian heritage and what have you to come into the ranks of the Park Service, and women to be elevated in positions in the Park Service. So I've seen progress being made continually. But also what has buoyed my spirits or lifted my spirits is the increased recognition of the American people through the passage of legislation in Congress on their behalf to commemorate or to preserve the enduring legacies of those who have contributed to the growth, the development of our nation from all backgrounds. When I first worked as a seasonal ranger in Grand Teton National Park, there were only two areas in the park system that spoke specifically to the contributions of African Americans. It was the Booker T. Washington National Monument in Virginia and the George Washington Carver National Monument in Missouri. But Congress also authorized the National Council of Negro Women to erect a memorial to Dr. Mary McLeod Bethune, and that legislation was enacted in 1960, but the memorial was not dedicated until 1974. But it so happened that while I donned the green and gray in June of 1962, Congress passed legislation, a bill signed into law by John F. Kennedy, authorizing the Frederick Douglass Home as a unit of the National Park System. And I often said that Mr. Douglass and I met the National Park Service in the same year, and his spirit burns deeply within. But today there's roughly 40 areas in the National Park System that speak specifically to the contribution, the sacrifices, and the role of African Americans. And that has been very encouraging, very, very encouraging.
So, Bob, this question might be a little bit more lighthearted than some of the other fare that we've been discussing here today. But you were you were appointed in 1997 by President Bill Clinton as the first and to date only Black director of the National Park Service, the 15th director of the National Park Service. And then, as you mentioned, in 2014, You were appointed by President Barack Obama as an expert member of the Advisory Council on Historic Preservation. That is two more U.S. presidents than I have been appointed by to anything. So you're winning by two at least, the ones that I know of. Uh, Genuinely curious, did you get to meet the presidents when those appointments happened? Did you get to spend any time with Bill Clinton and Barack Obama?
Yes, yes.
Amazing.
Yes. I'm not going to disclose everything. I'm going to save some of it for my memoir, Paul. Appreciate that. And let me just, you mentioned reference honorable, Bob. I really appreciate that. If you're ever confirmed by the United States Senate, that title stays with you as honorable. That's the background on that one. Yes, President Clinton nominated me to the Senate, and Congress passed legislation in 1996 requiring for the very first time in the history of the National Park Service that the director be subject to Senate confirmation. So I was the first one to go through that process, which was interesting. I enjoyed working with Congress. I really did. They love to beat up on you, but I enjoyed it as well. No, spent a great deal of time with President Clinton and perhaps more with First Lady Ms. Clinton.
Hmm.
We introduced, we inaugurated, we co-sponsored. I said we being the Park Service, co-sponsored a major program with the White House under Ms. Clinton leadership and the National Trust for Historic Preservation called Saving American Treasures. And I traveled extensively with Ms. Clinton promoting that. In fact, I made her an honorary park ranger on our visit to Mesa Verde National Park in Colorado. Spent a great deal of time with President Clinton, and I could send you some background information on that. Plus, I was his guest on Air Force One as we flew from Andrews Air Force Base out to Oklahoma to dedicate the Oklahoma City Memorial. Yeah, I spent a lot of time with him. And then with President Obama, attended a movie with him at the White House. Now, this is something that pained me because I think the movie was I mean the little theater. I think it seats about 40. I think it was a part of the East Wing
Oh,
demolition. But anyway, Ken Burns, who produced and Dayton Duncan, who produced the 6-part episodes called America's Greatest Idea, National Parks, he was able to condense that whole episode, the whole feature into about a 6-hour presentation because they won't take up all the president's time. So President Obama hosted a number of folks there in the theater, served us popcorn and some beverages. But I attended a number of functions there in the East Wings, in the East Wing in which President Obama participated. One is that as serving as advisor to Secretary Salazar, I was given the lead responsibility to develop a series of recommendations in terms of how the Interior and its bureaus and offices could be more responsive to military families and military personnel as well, in terms of educational outreach, youth engagement, what have you. And it was a multi-agency initiative under President Obama. And I recall that I was invited along with Secretary Salazar to the East Wing, in which President Obama announced his approval of the recommendations that came in from a number of departments. And there were several that were included in the announcement that President Obama had approved, and that pleased Secretary Salazar very much. And by my boss, the secretary, being happy, I was happy. So I have many fond memories from what occurred there at the White House, certainly in the Clinton administration and the Obama administration. But I worked with all the administrations, starting from President Kennedy on.
mm.
I obviously, like I said, obviously, I was not with the federal government during the George W. Bush administration, and I came back to Interior at the beginning of the Obama administration, which was 2009, and then worked with the Obama administration. So it was a great, great journey, just a great journey. I work very closely with First Lady Lady Bird Johnson in her beautification program. Work very closely with Ms. Barbara Bush. I enjoy working with her. She selected, and most First Ladies select a program or a project, what have you. And Ms. Barbara Bush's program was to reduce illiteracy. And she selected Mr. Frederick Douglass,
Hmm.
one who was born into slavery and became perhaps one of the most prominent orators, statesmen, authors, and what have you, as one recognizing the power of reading and being able to articulate one's thinking and what have you. And so by her adopting my hero, Mr. Douglas, I adopted Mrs. Barbara Bush. But she advocated and spoke a couple of times at the Douglas National Historic Site. But it was just a fantastic journey, a fantastic journey.
Bob, we could ask you all sorts of questions, about inclusion, about preservation of heritage, about, your
Yes.
work with the Advisory Council on Historic Preservation, your work with the Underground Railroad, bringing communities together, working with marginalized communities or historically underrepresented communities. But what calls to me in your life's work is your leadership. How can interpreters become better leaders? That's a loaded question. We don't have time for, I'm sure, your lengthy answer, but
We have 30 seconds.
we have 30 seconds, Bob. No, just kidding. But no, seriously, leadership is incredibly important. You can have all the ideals and all of the, best interests in the world, but you do you do need leadership. Ooh, I stumped him.
There's a wide range, obviously, of definitions of leadership and what are the characteristics of leadership, what might be the required training in leadership. But I think it's first is a recognition of one's obligation to others. The first obligation is that of respect. Secondly, is to be humble in terms of what may have been your achievements. And then thirdly, have a responsibility to contribute or an obligation to contribute to the development and the support of others on their respective journey. I am known to quote our forebears, regardless of where they are nationally or internationally and whatever their backgrounds may be. And I think of one who was a tremendous influence on Dr. King was Gandhi. And Gandhi, he reportedly have said that, "There go my people. I must hurry, for I am their leader." And what that tells me that if you're to be a leader, you have to have the ability to establish confidence in others, that they can assume a responsibility and they can recognize that there's those who are willing to give them support and that they would have faith in whatever you're advocating, the mission or the objective or program. And once they embrace that, they will do their own bidding. They will take the lead and they will be able to sacrifice and to struggle and to make a contribution. So a leader is one of inspiration, one of encouragement, and one of support. And once people have that, then the leader becomes the leader and does not have to necessarily be out front, but just saying that my people will do whatever to do. And I've often felt that in terms of working with the National Park Service as a superintendent, as a regional director, a deputy regional director, associate director, or the director of the Park Service. If I have the respect of my employees, I have the ability to encourage them to understand the mission of the Park Service, our annual goals, and whatever case may be. And if they know that I'm there to support them in terms of making that argument before the Secretary, the President of Congress, that we need more money, what have you, if they know that, then they will do the best job possible. And I found that to be true. The most outstanding men and women I ever worked for are the men and women of the National Park Service. And if I were the leader, I was the leader but I try to live up to those characteristics. But in a nutshell, one has to have a sense of humility and a sense of obligation of helping others on their journey.
So you've had a lengthy career of helping others. You are retired now, but I know that you're working with Dr. Teresa Coble at the University of Missouri St. Louis.
Correct.
So it hardly seems like a retirement to be pursuing that that intensive academic program. You're working on a memoir. So just in terms of what's next for you in this so-called retirement of yours, what's next for you? What are you working on? Tell us about this memoir. Tell us about the academic program, and then whatever else you have going on.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, it's an honor to work with Professor Coble. I just admire her intellect, her energy, and her commitment to developing future heritage leaders. We just concluded this year the third cohort in doctoral program in heritage leadership, and I've just signed up for the fourth one, and we get underway next month. So that's very encouraging. On the memoir, the thing that I agonize over is whether or not I could just restrict it, chronologically speaking, to my years with the Park Service, starting with a seasonal ranger in '62 and stepping down as director January 2001. But I've decided to go back as far as I can in my experiences. As an example, I can remember my first day going to this little two-room school with outside plumbing, hand-me-down books from the white school, what have you, at the age of 6. And I don't think can go back much further than that, but I can remember picking up from 6 years of age, and I want to bring it current to the day that it's actually published. And one of the other agonizing things is whether or not I disclose all. If I were to disclose all, there'd be no less than 8 or 10 bounties on my head. But I'm going to be as forthright as I can in my memoir. But I do want to express my gratitude in the memoir to those who have helped me on my journey. There's one passion that I have, which I hope was manifested in terms of what I tried to do in response to Song's question about leadership, was to encourage and support the most precious resource, not only of this nation, but of any nation, are its youth. So I am committed to continue to avail myself to any programs or any project, any conference seminar that encourage our youth to become the best citizens they can, and also to understand and appreciate the richness and the diversity of our natural and cultural heritage. So youth will always be a passion of mine. And I'm going to assume the role of a professor. Dr. Cole will appreciate this. And you, Paul, and Song are given a home assignment.
Oh, here we go.
Okay, yeah.
I was told there would be no homework.
Oh no,
Yeah,
it's a
we're
homework.
going into the weekend. Oh,
No,
Bob,
oh no,
yay.
oh no, no. And one thing you should realize too, I don't grade on the curve. Either,
Uh-oh.
either it's an A plus or an F minus.
Is
Uh-oh.
this
And I
open book?
and I see the potential in each of you as A plus students. But seriously, one of the legacies that's preserved in the national park system is to one of America's greatest daughters. She was the 15th of 17 children. Her parents were emancipated from the cotton fields of South Carolina. There are two areas in the park system that preserve her legacy. One is a memorial constructed on park lands about 3 blocks from the U.S. Capitol, and another is in Northwest Washington, which was the headquarters of the organization that she founded in 1935. And I speak of none other than Dr. Mary McLeod Bethune. So here's your assignment. It's available on the internet. It's her last will and testament in her own hands in 1955, the year of her death. And it concludes with this. And finally, and finally, I leave you a responsibility to our young people. They should never be discouraged from building a better world. Read her last will and testament. And if you're not inspired, then you really need to see me. We need to go in behind the shed and have a heart-to-heart talk. The Last Will and Testament by Dr. Mary McLeod Bethune. Read it, and I think you'll be inspired.
Amazing.
And
Written.
there will be a test on it. Seriously. I know where both of you work,
Bob, what are some of the details you're debating whether to put in your memoir or not? We promise not to tell.
I, I have lived in and out of Washington, Paul, for a number of years. One of the things I do know, there are no secrets. So you making a pledge to me, but no.
No, never mind that we're recording the podcast and about to publish
No.
this. But
Oh man, I tell you. But writing the memoir, I tell you, brings back a lot of memories. Oh, some good memories. A lot of heartburn too. Oh gosh, so many. Oh my. All good.
So, the Honorable Robert G. Stanton, it was an honor to share the stage with you in Virginia Beach at the NAI conference when you received your award. You received a rousing standing ovation from the participants of that conference, and it sent chills down my spine to be there and to see that and to know what you have done for this field and for interpretation and for conservation efforts, not just natural but cultural and historic for the country and for our profession. And so thank you so much. You are a monolithic figure in this field, and it was an honor to be there in Virginia Beach with you, an honor to be with you here on the podcast. And I'm not just blowing smoke. So I will tell you, I've done a lot of these podcasts. I don't always end them that way. So thank you so much for taking
You're very
time.
kind, Paul. Very kind.
I really do appreciate you taking the time out of your morning away from your writing to come chat with us. It's been very much our pleasure to speak with you again.
Well, thank you again, Paul, and thank you again, Song. And again, as I mentioned at the conference when I was presented the award by you and our esteemed president, that I accepted the award on behalf of the men and women, my fellow interpreters, who day in and day out are serving the American people and connecting them with their own natural and cultural heritage. Keep up the good work, and I'm here for you. And hopefully you're there for me as well. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
And interpreters,
That's what's up.
what's up?